All right, today we're jumping into a really fascinating teaching from 1975 by Sun Myung Moon. Think of it as a kind of roadmap for your inner world, a guide to building a direct, personal spiritual connection. So let's dive in and see how it's all supposed to work. So the teaching kicks off with a question that, honestly, a lot of people face. When it comes to faith, where do you even start? It's like you're trying to find your place on a map, but the map is invisible, right? You can't see or touch the spiritual world with your physical senses. So where do you begin? Well, the answer it gives is probably not what you're thinking. Okay, so the very first thing this teaching does is kind of flip the whole script on us. It says, hey, stop looking out there for God or for some big abstract concept. The argument is that the search, it just can't start out there. The only logical place to begin, the only real starting point, is to turn that focus inward and look at ourselves. But hold on, it's not just a free-for-all look inside. The teaching makes a really important distinction, like right away. It says if you try to find your spiritual center by focusing on your body, well, that's a dead end. It's not going to work. The entire journey, from start to finish, has to be centered on the mind. And this is where it gets really interesting. The text totally acknowledges that, every single one of us is different. Our minds aren't cookie cutter. They're all shaped by our personal environments, our habits, our emotions. And what that means is there's no single rigid formula for this. The real key is finding your unique angle, your own personal orientation to make that divine connection. Okay, so that's the big question, right? If everyone's mind is different, how in the world are you supposed to find that perfect alignment? Well, to explain this, the text gives us two really powerful metaphors for how to tune your mind to get that clear spiritual signal. The first one is called the 0 point. And the best way to picture this is to think of the needle on an old power meter, Before you can get an accurate reading, that needle has to be perfectly still right at 0. So this 0 point is like that for your mind, a state of perfect internal balance. The text describes it as a place that both exists and yet does not. And from that neutral spot, you can finally start to pick up on spiritual signals without your own stuff, your biases, your mood, getting in the way and distorting everything. Then there's the second metaphor, the mind's gate. Now, don't think of this like a simple door that's just open or closed. It's way more dynamic. Picture it as a rotating portal inside you, something that's always in motion. And the whole goal is to learn how to consciously tune it, to align your moving gate perfectly with a corresponding gate in the heavens. When you get that alignment right, boom, you've got a direct, open channel. And this idea of a moving gate connects perfectly to the fact that our inner state is never static, right? It's always changing. The text even compares the daily cycle of our mind to the 4 seasons. Maybe your morning feels like a hopeful spring, and by night it feels more like a quiet winter. The point is, learning to recognize these internal seasons is the key to knowing the absolute best time to open that gate and try to make a connection. So let's say you do it. You find your 0 point, you align your gate. What happens next? Well, according to this teaching, a whole series of predictable phenomena start to happen. And this isn't about some sudden lightning bolt from the sky. No, it's a progression, a gradual journey that moves from really subtle, symbolic hints to things that are much more direct and clear. It really builds up in stages. At first, it's super subtle. You might get hints in your daily life, like you see a bird fly off and suddenly you understand something. It's those little moments of insight. From there, it can move into dreams or even that hazy, half-awake state where you get revelations. After that, you might experience symbolic visions, things that aren't literal but are meant to help cultivate what the text calls the field of the mind. And eventually, if you stick with it, this path can lead you to a place where you receive direct, clear guidance. And what's the end game here? What's the whole point of these experiences? Well, the ultimate goal is to reach what the teaching calls a state of resonance. This is where that line between your own mind and the spirit world really starts to get blurry, to dissolve. The analogy for this is just fantastic. It says, your mind becomes like a tuning fork. Think about that. Once it's properly tuned, if the spirit realm vibrates at a certain frequency, your mind just naturally, automatically starts vibrating along with it in perfect harmony. It creates this effortless connection. You don't even have to try, it just happens. Now, this all sounds great, but the path isn't always easy. The teaching is pretty realistic here. It says our physical bodies, with all their baggage and what it calls a fallen nature, will actually resist this powerful spiritual energy at first. So a kind of purification process has to happen. The spiritual power doesn't just flood in all at once. It comes in waves, giving your body time to adapt and strengthen until it can finally handle that connection. And finally, the teaching brings it all back down to earth with a really practical observation. It identifies two basic types of people you'll find on this kind of path. And in doing so, it really highlights that classic tension that exists in almost any spiritual journey, the push and pull between feeling and reason. So on one side, you've got the spiritual type. These are the people who just grasp things by feeling. They're naturally drawn to God, to prayer, and their focus is very internal. Then, on the other side, you have the intellectual type. These folks need reason, they need theories, they're externally focused, and often look at things like prayer as, well, maybe a bit of superstition. It's interesting, the text notes that many of history's great spiritual figures were actually that first spiritual type. But here's the kicker, and it's a big one. The teaching warns that neither of these types is the complete package. Not at all. The spiritual person can be super inconsistent, They might burn really brightly for a while and then just fizzle out. And the intellectual person, while they might be steady, can lack the deep inner experience needed for a real connection. So what's the answer? You guessed it, balance. And to really drive this home, the teaching ends by quoting that famous line about how you must worship in both spirit and in truth. This isn't a choice between two options. It's not either or. The whole argument is for a state of harmony, where you can stand right in the middle, perfectly balanced, able to navigate both the internal world of the spirit and the external world of truth. And that leaves us with a pretty challenging final thought, doesn't it? According to this framework, the ultimate spiritual position isn't about picking a side. It's not intuition or intellect, feeling or reason. It's about doing the hard work of integrating both of them, of creating a balanced self that can actually truly resonate with the divine.